It goes without saying that this episode is dedicated to the memory of my father, John Fisher, who was born on the 8th of June 1936 and died on the 20th of May 2024. May he rest in peace. The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 169, in which, after what you might call an unscheduled delay, we will at last be looking at part 1 of the 2016 British Broadcasting Corporation radio play. And Watership Down truly reaches the modern era. The 2016 BBC Radio 4 radio play, Part 1. Part 1 of the 2016 BBC radio play of Watership Down was first broadcast on Sunday the 6th of November 2016 on BBC Radio 4. Its last broadcast was on Tuesday the 24th of December 2019 on BBC Radio 4 Extra. It was dramatised by Brian Sibley, who also wrote the 1981 Radio 4 adaptation of Lord of the Rings, and directed by Mark Beebe, who sadly died on Christmas Day in 2020. You can listen to Part 1 on YouTube at the Lapine Radio Play archive. There will be a link in the notes. From the very start of this version of Watership Down, the quality of the music is very obvious. An extended opening theme quietens to the background as our female narrator gives a brief introduction to the blessing of Elecrera, her voice giving way to the voice of Frith himself for a few moments as he makes his promise to Elecrera. After some brief credits, we are straight inside Fiver's nightmare, full of unsettling noises of automation as he narrates his own terror. As Hazel wakes him, he hears the voice of the Dark One as he sees blood and mentions cracking bones. The voice, clearly meant to be that of the Black Rabbit of Inlay, says he has come for his people. The narrator introduces the outskirt as Hazel and Fiver, saying the story begins in Fiver's nightmares. As we hear the sounds of late spring, the narrator emulates the book with descriptions of nature. Fiver is describing his nightmare to Hazel in more detail, and he refers to the Black Rabbit as the Black Emissary. It is unfortunate that this version decides not to call him the Black Rabbit, almost as if it was felt that using that name would sound silly. This is a story about talking rabbits, and yet the R word is deliberately avoided. In the book, Fiver seeing the notice board leads to his nightmare. Here it is the other way round. However, when he sees the field covered in blood, it is almost stated casually compared with the previous versions. This Fiver has already been through his nightmare. The notice board merely confirms it. And so we come to the Sandalford Owsler of this version. And this is where this first modern interpretation of Watership Down really starts to sound different. Many cultures use accents as a shortcut to personality, and we British very much do this. It is also, of course, a shortcut to deeply held prejudice. Some accents sound stupid, some dishonest, and some can sound cruel, etc. The Owsler of this version sound to me like they have emerged from a Lapine Guy Ritchie film. Their toughness is signified by working-class South East English accents, while the vulnerability of the outskirters is demonstrated by nice, safe-sounding, received pronunciation accents, rather like mine, in fact. I could go into great detail on the political irony of this, but I won't bother here. Captain Holly introduces the Thra to Bigwig, who has brought Hazel and Fiver to see him. And this Thra does not sound like a retired army officer, as he has before. This Thra sounds like he would be introduced by Guy Ritchie's narrator as having once beaten a rabbit to death with a large carrot. He oozes casual brutality. And I actually like this portrayal of the Owsler. Rabbits often live tough, brutal lives, so it seems right for some of them to sound like it. However, to the accompaniment of a low background rumbling denoting being underground at Sandalford, this Thra's attitude towards Fiver is the usual one, his fake politeness sounding like a threat. and Fiver is soon led away by Hazel. Bigwig is told to stay. Hazel is talking to Blackberry, another middle-class sounding rabbit, about the meeting when they are interrupted by Bigwig. He has more or less been sacked from the Owsler. In the book, he quits. When he asks if Fiver was serious, it provokes a fit of fear from him. The decision is taken to leave, and Bigwig says they should persuade as many as possible to join them. An owl signifies that night has fallen. Dandelion joins Hazel and Fiver, followed by Blackberry. Dandelion says there is a rumour of a plot against the Thra. This is new. Bigwig arrives with Hawkbit and Acorn, who are Owsler members here. Silver will be following. And then Holly arrives to arrest Bigwig. The sounds of aggression as Bigwig attacks him are more impressive and visceral than in previous versions. Think of Holly's roar in the 1978 film. As Bigwig takes on Holly, the group, seemingly consisting of only 7 rabbits, leaves. It is unclear if Silver, the 8th, has arrived. We find out much later that he did. This group of 8 rabbits is only one more than the group in the 1999 to 2001 TV series. In the book, 11 rabbits left. The group pause to wait for Bigwig, and then Fiver says they must follow the brook through the wood. Eerie background music signifies the fear this provokes, and the narrator clarifies a rabbit's fear of woodland. Nighttime sounds give way to birdsong and the sounds of the Enborn, which Fiver says they must cross. As soon as he has finished explaining why, and the kind of new home they are looking for, Bigwig arrives back to warn of the dog. This Bigwig is like that of the book, saying that Fiver will have to be left behind. There is no Pipkin here. Blackberry, finding the piece of wood that has writing on it here, interrupts Hazel and Bigwig's argument with his plan. Bigwig and Dandelion push Fiver across the Enborn. After a brief musical interlude, Bigwig is just talking about finding cover when Fiver is attacked by a crow. This is the first dramatic portrayal of the crow attack, though in the book Pipkin is attacked as well. The interlude returns for a moment before we find ourselves at the road. There has been no bean field. Bigwig's lessons on roads, hoodadill and headlights is true to the book, and we are then at another narration about the rabbits finding themselves on the alien environment of the common at night. We hear the argument between Bigwig and Hawkbit in the background, Hawkbit demanding to know who is chief. While Blackberry and Dandelion calm things down, Fiver sees the distant ridge of Watership Down in the moonlight, as well as the mist that lies between them. There is no Bigwig biting Hawkbit, and a further interlude finds us in the rain. The rabbits are about to dig scrapes when they spot a doe watching them. It is Cowslip, who has been gender swapped, and she will not be the last. The conversation about staying at her warren is mostly true to the book, with Hazel briefly asking Alakara that they are doing the right thing, though Fiver does not warn against doing so yet. Another narration makes it clear how welcoming the new warren seems. The female Cowslip's calm voice is to me even more creepy than previous versions, but that is probably with knowledge of context. Then Strawberry introduces himself, as well as Nildro Hayne, who actually speaks. Remembering that this version was made a mere 8 years ago, we are truly into the era of female representation in drama. In this version, a female character was never going to remain silent, and a good thing too. I know gender swapping of characters can be controversial, but the doe Nildro Hayne is referred to as speaking in the book, but is just never quoted. Strawberry and Nildro Hayne show Hazel and Fiver around, starting with the impressive Great Burrow. Fiver is still apparently okay with this warren. They explain about not needing a chief or an Owsler and how food is left for them by the farmer. And then they come to the shape. Nildro Hayne says it was made by a rabbit called Kingcup. She calls for him, but he seems to be missing. The taboo against asking where anyone is seems not to apply in this version, and Nildro Hayne's quiet distress at finding him missing is our first hint at something being wrong with this place. In the book, the shapes were made by a rabbit called Laburnum some time ago, and they are the last vestige of this warren's admiration for Alakara. Back with the group, Fiver expresses his first misgivings. Then Cowslip interrupts, suggesting entertainment, and her manner begins to seem slightly passive-aggressive. Having rejected a tale of El, she introduces Silverweed, whose recitation of just the last verse of the poem from the book is sufficient to terrify Fiver, who, in the middle of the gathering, says that it isn't a poem, it is the truth. Hazel makes his excuses and insists on a rainy silflay with what seems to be the whole group. Fiver has not barged his way outside, as in the book. Fiver explains how the place is making him feel, using the language he employs to describe Silverweed before even hearing his poetry in the book, with Bigwig showing impatience with him. He is persuaded to come back below ground and sleep. Hazel's strange dream about Bigwig carrying red yew berries among twisted branches becomes Fiver's, partly narrated for effect. The next morning, Hazel and Bigwig find him above ground, saying he is leaving for the hills. Bigwig loses his temper with him, though not as viciously as in the book, goes back towards the warren, and is snared. At first, Fiver seems to go into a trance about his dream before Hazel snaps him out of it. This is new. The sounds of Bigwig's suffering are quite visceral here, and I have no issue with that. Snaring, as I have said before, is an obscene way to kill any animal. It is Dandelion, followed by Fiver, who dig the peg out, there being no Pipkin. Thinking Bigwig is dead, Fiver says the Black Emissary is coming, earning a rebuke from Hazel, but Blackberry prompts him to say the Lapine last rites. They turn to the reaction of Cowslip and her rabbits. Then Bigwig comes round, saying, "I'll kill her," which jarred a bit for me, despite knowing that Cowslip is a doe in this version. After Fiver's abbreviated reality check about the terrible nature of this warren, they spot Strawberry running towards them. Nildro Hayne, very tragically, went looking for the shapes-maker Kingcup, and was snared. Hazel tells Strawberry he can join them, and they leave. To a musical transition, the narrator recounts the magpie finding the discarded snare that ends part 1 of the book. She then takes us to the foot of Watership Down, telling us that the group no longer doubt their individual abilities. Reaching the top of the down, Dandelion gives a calm rendition of being able to see the whole world. And then we are back to pre-dug warrens on top of Watership Down. The 2002 radio play was far better on this part of the story, outdoing even the 1978 film. But the convention, to save time, had become that there was already an abandoned warren at the top of Watership Down, rather than just the rough burrows halfway up the slope of the book, and this version follows that convention. Strawberry has proposed adding a great burrow. Bigwig is still not a fan, but Hazel insists he is treated well. Events are telescoped in a similar way to the 2002 play, as Captain Holly is discovered wandering, seemingly already on the down. Again, there is no Bluebell with him, and Holly gives his account of being underground at the destruction of Sandalford Warren, as well as having made it above ground in time to see the final tearing apart of the ground that he witnesses in the book. This is accompanied by the kind of sad music in the background that makes this radio play so modern, and it is very effective. The narrator tells us about one cloud feeling lonely. This is the prelude to the arrival of a very different Keehar. Dandelion and Bigwig are discussing Bigwig's ongoing distrust of Strawberry when they spot something in the grass. The initial cries of the injured black-headed gull they find before they give way to speech are quite authentic, black-headed gulls having a very different sound from the more familiar common gull. This Keehar is very Eastern European, well, at least to British ears, which is not unusual. But there the similarity ends, because this Keehar is female. And, as a sign of the times, her foreignness is not played for laughs. She even comes out with Keehar's instance of bad language in almost a throwaway manner. Now, I have no particular issue with gender-swapped characters, as long as their significance is not then diminished, as in the Blackberry of the 1999 to 2001 TV series. But the modern nervousness around portrayals of foreignness does seem a bit of a shame sometimes. Keehar, it seems to me, should be funny. But, having said that, the Keehar of the book isn't really played for laughs. That convention really began with the 1978 film, with Zero Mostel's hilarious voicing. So perhaps, in a strange way, this Keehar is truer to the book than any previous version. Hazel has a long conversation with Keehar, during which she tells a reluctant Bigwig to fetch worms and says a special burrow must be prepared for her. The language is made simple, which makes it clear that this conversation is in the lingua franca between different species. This is very true to the book. Later, Hazel explains his reasoning: the lack of does and the need to persuade some to join them. This had also been on Blackberry's mind. Bigwig, having realised this is not just an act of charity, is fully on board and goes to fetch more worms. The narrator explains that Hazel offering to help a potential enemy will be seen as either a sign of being an heir to the spirit of El-Ahrairah or a reckless adventurer. This commentary is additional to that of the book, and it is also a prelude to what is arguably Hazel's greatest act of ill-advised bravado of the whole story, one that nearly ends him. Bigwig's talking with Keha has worked, and she offers to help the rabbits find Mudders, her wing having recovered. After a harp interlude, we are with Hazel and Fiver again. Keha has been gone for 4 days, and Fiver reassures Hazel that he dreamt she would bring them El-Ahrairah's gifts of trickery, great danger, and a blessing for the Warren. This interesting prophecy does appear in the book, where Fiver says it half asleep and seems unaware he has spoken, but here he is aware. Hazel repeats the words danger and a blessing to himself. Fiver suggests they take a look at the new Great Burrow, which is referred to as a honeycomb. Just as Strawberry is explaining its construction, Keha returns. She has found the hutch rabbits of Nuthanger Farm and the large warren to the south that will turn out to be Efrafa. At a meeting of the new warren, Hazel delegates Holly as an ambassador to the large warren. Holly chooses 2 rabbits to go with him. Silver, who has not been mentioned since the departure from Sandalford and it turns out did make it on time, and Strawberry. There is no buckthorn in this version. A light musical theme introduces the narrator talking of a spirit of mischief that can enter a young rabbit, as we then hear Hazel talk to Blackberry about the hutch rabbits at the farm. They are just going to talk with them, he says. So it is Blackberry, rather than Pipkin, who accompanies Hazel on his foray, and Dandelion joins them. The narrator speaks of Lord Frith telling El-Ahrairah that one day his tricks will go too far and the world will be rid of a rascal. This is light-hearted foreshadowing indeed. At the farm, they smell all the relevant dangers, both feline and canine, before entering the barn. In the hutch are 4 rabbits, the doe Clover and a gender-swapped doe Boxwood, as well as the doe Laurel and the buck Cornflower, the last being presumably a male replacement for the original doe Haystack. All have West Country accents, except for Boxwood, who is Scottish. Was that clear enough? The 2 missions to Nuthanger are, as in 2002, merged, as Blackberry tries to find a way to get the hutch open after Hazel tries to persuade them to come along. Only the buck Cornflower seems reluctant. As the hutch rabbits start pushing against the wire to get it open, we hear a cat. Apparently it has also woken the dog. This is where the wild rabbits should just cut and run, of course. Having forced the hutch open, they all run for it. We hear a tense, low musical theme that partly resembles the Escape from Efrafa theme of the 1978 film. We also hear car doors, and Hazel mentions not looking into lights as they run. And then there are human voices. Hazel says he will run in another direction to distract them. The narrator speaks of rabbits who the black emissary persuades to ignore dangers. And we hear a shotgun. Fiver is dreaming. He cannot find Hazel. A whispered voice asks him if he wants to know where he is. Fiver realises he is speaking with the black emissary, who tells him to follow a limping, shadowy version of Hazel from the down. They are by the notice board at Sandalford. Only it isn't the same one. Fiver asks what it means. All in good time. My time, is the response. Comparison with the book. The summarisation of the original plot here compares well with the 2002 radio play overall, and it is always a good sign when you encounter an episode from the original book portrayed dramatically for the first time. Here, that was the crow attack, and, on a Corvid-related theme, the discovery of the discarded snare by a magpie. Hearing Neil Drohane's voice was also a good touch, and I have no issue with the creepy doe Cowslip, her smooth female voice oozing passive aggression. Keha, as I've said, is actually quite true to the book, and her being female makes no difference to this. But it is the portrayal of Bigwig that I am particularly impressed by here. For the first time since the 1978 film, the right balance is struck, and for me, what we seem to have here is a Bigwig who has a temper and is capable of violence, but he is not a thug. In the next episode, of course, his character will be tested to destruction. Overall then, a very entertaining listen that keeps you on your toes with its modern innovations. Next time, we look at part 2 of the 2016 BBC radio play.